On this channel, we're always talking about the nuts and bolts, the parts, the systems, the theories, history, but we never really talk about the mental end of things, because it's not really part of the YouTube automotive world, right? The mental aspects of it. And the whole car thing is just mental to begin with, really, if you stop and you think about it. But there's something that we all deal with, every single one of us, me, you, everybody who deals with cars, projects, motorcycles, trucks, doesn't make any difference. We all deal with it at one time or another. And it's project burnout or avoidance. And there are two different things. Burnout and avoidance are two different things. But I'm recently going through something with this charger, which falls under the heading of avoidance. So before I talk about this exactly, I want to use an example of a vehicle that we started on 3 years ago, almost 4 years ago actually, when we first started the channel. I had picked up a Dodge Ram Charger. It was an 88 or 89, I don't remember, but it was clean. This thing was great. If you guys have been watching the channel for any amount of time, you'll know the one I'm talking about. We had it at the old shop, and I bought it. The paint on it was really nice. It had no rust. The interior was a little, but it was basically decent, and the motor was toast. The motor was shot. So I picked this thing up with the idea of building like a muscle truck. And I loved the idea. Like, it was one of those things that kept me up at night, thinking about all the different things I want to do to this truck. So what I noticed over time was that I was avoiding working on the truck. It just sat there day after day, week after week, and month then after month. And I was like, why don't I want to work on this thing? And something happened today to remind me of this and actually triggered this whole thing. Because I started working on the charger again. I developed some avoidance to it. And I started working on it again today, and I needed to pull the headers off of it to get the transmission out. And I had to use this step stool because the car's jacked up and I couldn't reach the plug wires to get them off, so I needed the step stool. And this step stool right here is what killed the Ram Charger project. Because what happened was, the Ram Charger sits up high. Just its natural nature. It wasn't even raised. But it sits up high, and the motor is a big reach over the fender. I'm 5'10", I'm average height. Now some guys love trucks enough, and they love raised trucks, that they'll overcome any obstacle to work on it. They just don't care. That's their thing. They're passionate about their raised trucks. I'm not one of them. I respect it, I understand it, but I'm not one of them. I don't really enjoy that. And the thing with the Ram Charger was every time I wanted to work on it, to get under the hood to work on it, I had to grab this very step stool and stand there and lean way over the fender to unbolt nuts and bolts and so on and so forth. It became a drag. And then if I needed to move to another part, I had to climb down off my little step stool, move it to another place, and I was confined, and I could only work in like these little spurts, you know what I mean, without stopping to move the step stool. And my working habits are not like that. My working habits, I'm a very, once I dive into something, I'm all over it, like a monkey on a banana, you know what I'm saying? It just totally stifled me. That simple thing, the step stool. And so I got rid of the truck because I realized now, the thing I love the most about working with cars is I love to tinker. Once it's together, I like to try different things. I like to play with the distributor. I want to play with the carburetor. I want to tune this. I want to change that. And anything along those lines with the Ram Charger was a drudgery because I couldn't just fluidly reach everything that I wanted to. Like I said, this is my own thing. Lots of guys who are watching this right now have trucks like that. They love trucks like that, and because they love it so much, those drudgeries don't even register. It's like, yeah, I'll build a plank. I'll do whatever I'm going to do, and I'll work on it. We're not all the same. Like, we have the same basic interests. We all love machineries. We all love to build things. But we don't all love the same things about them. But that commonality of project burnout or avoidance, that's something we all have. So here's what happened with this charger. And it took me to this morning to really realize what happened with it, why I brought it in here and I was like, hammers to hell, let's go, let's rock on this thing. Because I had the crunched quarter panel, the bent frame rail and the crunched quarter panel. So here's what happened. I first bought this car, I guess it was 8, maybe 10 years ago or something along those lines. It was roached. I mean, this thing was bad. You think it looks bad now, you had to see it when we first got it. It was a flood car, and it had, the whole interior was filled with sand. Like all of the crevices were just filled with sand. And at some point in the car's life, it had spent a lot of time on clay roads, like they had gone off-roading with this car. So when we got it, the interior was roached, all filthy, mud, sand, everything else, and underneath the car and all around the engine was just caked with clay, this hard clay. But my goal with this car wasn't to make it nice. My goal with this car was to put it together like as a rat. And it had that crunched quarter panel. And the crunched quarter panel kind of, it was like the punctuation mark on, oh, this is a beater, right? So we built this 440, we dumped it in. I took a pressure washer, went all over the car, made a few laps with it, hit it with some black primer, called it a day. It runs. And we kept it around for years like this. We used it when we first started this channel at how to do a bitch and burnout video. It's raining, guys, so if you hear anything in the background. And all was well. I loved the car, I loved the way it was, I loved its ridey nature, okay? And then what happened was I fixed the quarter panel. I spent some time on it, put a lot of effort into it, and you know, all along the goal eventually was to get around and do the whole car, you know, and make it a nice car. But for right now, it's just a roach and it's a rat, and we're going to have fun with it. I fixed that quarter panel. I'm looking at how straight it is now, how, you know, I got the frame rail straight, I got all little, you know, all of the ripples, and I'm like, okay, now we got to get underneath there. I got to pull the training. The training definitely needs to be rebuilt. It slips. It's junk. As soon as I climbed under the car to start unbolting the exhaust and whatnot to get the transmission out of the car, I'm looking around at all of the decay under there. It's sound, it's solid under there, but there's still mud, like there's the rear axle housing. I've changed the center section, but the housing itself is still covered with clay and just like a thick coating, like a half-inch thick coating of clay. And I'm like, oh man, I made the quarter panel nice, and I'm gonna, you know, gonna go around the car and make it like nicer, but look underneath here, I can't, and I started avoiding it. And I would come up with excuse after excuse after excuse to not climb under there, because I look at the car and it's like, oh, okay, this is good. I look at the quarter panel, that's great. I'm proud of myself. I climb underneath and it's like, oh, and I would just avoid it. And I legitimately, I did have other things that needed to be done. So it did take a kind of a back seat. But what should have taken me like 3 hours to like drop the exhaust, drop the trans, I got to blow the front end apart. Now it's been at least 3 weeks since I've actually dove into it. So what's the moral of the story? Well, today I broke the cycle. I finally bit the bullet. I swept up around it. I cleaned out underneath it. I laid down some cardboard and said, I am going to work on this car. And then once I broke that boundary, once I broke that thing and actually committed to climb underneath with wrenches and go to work, it's broken. Now I'm okay with it. Now I see all of the stuff I got to do, and I'm okay with doing it. No, I'm lying. I'm not okay with doing it. It's going to be a filthy, disgusting, I'm going to make a mess of the shop. I'm going to make a mess out of myself. But to me, the car, it has to be done. I can't have a car that has a straight body and a decent, you know, we're going to do this in a satin black. I can't have a car that looks okay, sound on the outside, but underneath is all crusty and dirty and everything else. So I'm going to spend a good bit of time under there making the bottom of it at least match the top. So sometimes you just got to break the ice. You have to figure out what it is. What is this thing that's stopping you from proceeding on your car, from getting on your car? In my experience, there are any number of things that'll bog you down on a project. Mission creep is one of them, and this is kind of a version of mission creep, where you started to do one thing and then another and another and another, and before you know it, like you've got this entire, like this crazy mountain of work to do. Some of it is just situational. I have avoided working on cars because you don't realize you're avoiding something until you actually come to grips with it. I've avoided working on cars because they were just in an inconvenient place to work on them, where there was too much clutter around them. I've avoided, I mean, there's just so many reasons why you'll avoid working on a car. Sometimes you don't have a clear vision of what the car is going to be, and that will stop you. You know, so I bought this car because I love the way it looks. I love this, I love that, but I don't know what I want to do with it. I don't have a clear vision of how, and so you get to that avoidance part again, because it's like there's a lot of work, but you don't really see the carrot at the end of the stick, that thing that motivates you, because this stuff is not easy. You know, working on any of these things, it's not easy. Regular people look like us, like we're nuts, because they couldn't fathom laying under cars and ripping things apart and modifying them, and they don't understand it, because this isn't really the normal thing to do. But in this situation with this car, I found that I just needed to bite the bullet, grab the tool, climb underneath, and now I'm re-enthused on the project, and now I'll keep working on it. Sometimes that's all you got to do. Something's been sitting stagnant for a long time, just bite the bullet. Just climb under there and do it. Find the thing that you're avoiding and dive into it and break the ice, and then you'll start the rhythm. You'll start the rhythm again. This project called Burnout too, which is something I come across that I'll do a car, I'll get it finished, and it's like I put so much mental and physical energy into it. I put so much money into it. I put so much of focus on it that when it's finished, it's like I just want to get away from this thing. Now, and I think that's a very common deal also. There are so many cars, there's tens of thousands of cars all around the world that are basically finished project cars that just sit there because it's burnout. It's like, I've worked on this car, I've looked at it, I've bled for it for 3, 4, 5, 8 years, whatever it is, and now I just can't even stand to even look at it. That happens. Think it all through. If you find yourself in a position where you're just avoiding a project, or you're burnt out on a project, or whatever the reasons, we all have different reasons. You have to figure out what it is. What's the thing that's stopping you from working on this car, from making progress on this car? You got to get inside your own head. Figure it out, because you can't work on the machine until you've worked on yourself, until your head is there. Now I'm actually looking forward to climbing back on this thing, and that's what I'm going to do as soon as we're done shooting this video. And I hope you got something out of that. I'll see you tomorrow.